She laughed first, loudly, confidently, with that laugh that always sounded a little too loud. "Well, maybe we should just swap husbands," she said, raising her glass as if it were the most innocuous toast in the world. I didn't even have time to crack a smile when I noticed the laughter around me had become uneven. Someone snorted, someone looked away. And the neighbor, the one standing across from us, didn't laugh at all. He simply looked at her, long appraisingly. And then, slowly, he smiled. Not playfully, not awkwardly, confidently, too confidently. "And why not?" he said calmly, as if the proposal were real, already thought out. Some exchanges are beneficial. At that moment, something inside me snapped. Not jealousy, not anger, cold. The kind that comes when you realize you're the only one who doesn't know the rules of the game. She gave me a quick glance, irritated, not apologetic. "Relax," she hissed, leaning toward me. "It's just a joke. You're ruining everything again." But I could already see her straighten up, how she stopped laughing and began to control her expression, as if she'd accidentally said out loud what had been swirling around her for a long time. And he was still looking at her, not at me, at her, as if she were someone with whom they'd already agreed on something. The people around me started talking again. The music grew louder. The moment seemed to dissolve. But for me, it didn't. I stood there, holding a plastic cup in my hand, and for the first time in a long time, I clearly understood. This wasn't a joke. This was a test. And, it seemed, not for me. What stayed with me wasn't what he said. It was how comfortable he was saying it. He didn't look around to see if anyone would laugh. He didn't soften it with a joke. He just met her eyes and held them, like this was a conversation they'd already rehearsed somewhere else. People shifted. Someone cleared their throat. A couple drifted away toward the grill. But he stayed planted, shoulders relaxed, beer hanging loosely from his fingers, watching her reaction like it mattered more than anyone else's. Like mine didn't exist. She laughed again, shorter this time, forced. Too quick. The kind of laugh that's meant to shut something down without actually saying no. "You're crazy," she said. But she didn't step back. She didn't look at me. She didn't correct him. He tilted his head slightly, amused. "I'm just saying," he replied. "You never know until you say things out loud." That's when I noticed the details I can't unsee now. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear. The way her shoulders turned toward him, just a few degrees. The way her body answered before her words did. I finally spoke, asked what the hell that was supposed to mean. My voice sounded chujim even to me. He glanced at me for the first time, genuinely surprised, like he'd forgotten I was part of the setup. "Man, relax," he said. She started it. She sighed, hard, annoyed at me. "Why are you being like this?" She whispered. "You're embarrassing me." That was the moment I understood. Whatever that exchange was, it wasn't accidental. It landed exactly where it was meant to. And the most disturbing part wasn't his reaction. It was how little she seemed bothered by it. The laughter faded, but the silence that replaced it was heavier than the joke ever was. Not an awkward silence, not the kind people rush to fill. This one settled in, thick and deliberate, like everyone instinctively knew something had crossed a line and no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Music played from someone's speaker, bass thumping too cheerfully for the mood. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Normal sounds. Life going on. But inside that little circle we were standing in, time felt stalled. I watched people avoid eye contact with me. With her. With him. Everyone suddenly found a reason to look at their phone, refill a drink, check on the grill. She shifted her weight and exhaled loudly, the universal signal that this should be over by now. God, it got quiet, she said, rolling her eyes. You'd think I said something illegal. No one laughed. I realized then that no one was laughing for me. They weren't uncomfortable because of the joke. They were uncomfortable because of what the joke exposed. Because of how naturally he'd responded. Because of how little she'd shut it down. She leaned closer to me, her smile gone now, voice low and sharp. Can you stop sulking? You're making this weird. I wanted to ask why it wasn't already weird for her. Why she wasn't angry. Why she wasn't embarrassed. Why she didn't look shaken at all. But my mouth stayed shut. I was still catching up to the moment everyone else seemed to understand before I did. Across from us, the neighbor took a slow sip of his beer, completely at ease. Like the silence didn't threaten him. Like it belonged to me. And standing there, surrounded by half-friends and forced normalcy, I felt something unfamiliar creep in. Not anger, not jealousy, but isolation. The sudden, sickening awareness that whatever just happened I was the only one still pretending it was nothing. She didn't wait until we got home. She didn't even wait until we were alone. As soon as we stepped away from the group, she let out an exaggerated sigh, like I was the exhausting part of the evening. "I don't know why you're acting like that," she said, shaking her head. "It was a joke. A stupid, harmless joke." I told her it didn't feel harmless. I told her the way he reacted was off. The way she didn't shut it down was worse. She laughed at that. Actually laughed, like I'd just accused her of believing in conspiracy theories. "You're reading way too much into it," she said. "That's your problem. You always do this. You take nothing and turn it into drama." She walked a few steps ahead of me, already scrolling on her phone, already mentally done with the conversation. That hurt more than her words. It was like my discomfort was an inconvenience she refused to accommodate. "What did you want me to do?" she added without looking up. "Make a scene? Apologize for your insecurity?" There it was. The word. Insecurity. Her favorite shortcut. Any feeling of mine she didn't want to deal with got flattened into that single label. No discussion required after that. I tried one last time. Told her how exposed it made me feel. How small. How the whole thing lingered in the air long after everyone moved on. She stopped, turned to me, and her face hardened. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, "and I'm not going to babysit your emotions." In that moment, I realized something subtle but devastating. She wasn't trying to reassure me. She was trying to end the conversation, to erase the moment, to move on as if my reaction was the only thing that needed correcting. And somehow, standing there while she dismissed the entire thing with a shrug, the joke itself started to feel less important than what came after. How easily she taught me that my discomfort didn't matter. I tried to drop it. I really did. I nodded when she changed the subject, pretended to listen as she talked about work, about weekend plans, about literally anything else. But the moment kept replaying in my head, sharper each time. Not the joke itself, the ease of it. How naturally it left her mouth. How prepared he seemed to receive it. What bothered me wasn't that she joked. It was that she never once checked in with me. Never asked if I was okay. Never circled back later to say, "Hey, that came out wrong." Instead, she treated my reaction like a malfunction she expected me to fix on my own. I started noticing how fast she wanted to move past it. How irritated she got when I went quiet. "You're still on that?" she asked at one point, incredulous. Wow, that word again. Still, like there was a normal expiration date for discomfort, and I'd missed it. I realized I couldn't let it go because letting it go would mean agreeing with her version of reality, that nothing strange had happened, that I was imagining things, that my gut couldn't be trusted. And once you start swallowing that, you don't stop at one moment. You rewrite the past. You preemptively doubt the future. The more she dismissed it, the heavier it became. If it was truly nothing, why was she so defensive? Why did she need me silent so badly? Why did it feel like I'd violated some unspoken rule by reacting at all? That's when it hit me. This wasn't about a neighbor or a party or a bad joke. It was about boundaries, about respect, about whether there was room in this marriage for my discomfort or only for her convenience. And once that question formed, it refused to leave. Once that question lodged itself in my head, memories started rearranging themselves. Not new ones, old ones, quietly waiting their turn. Little changes I'd noticed, but filed away because they were easier to ignore than confront. She'd started guarding her phone like it was an extension of her body. Screen always angled away. Notifications silenced. If I asked who texted, I'd get a vague answer or a joke about me being the FBI. At the time, I laughed along. Now, that laughter tasted bitter. There was the shift in her schedule. Late meetings. Spontaneous drinks. Errands that took just a little too long. I remembered standing at the window more than once, watching the driveway, telling myself traffic was bad, that I was being paranoid. And then there was the way she talked to me. Not cruel, not outright, just thinner, less patience, less warmth. Compliments disappeared. Touch became functional. A hand pulled away a second too early. A kiss on the cheek instead of the lips. Death by 1,000 almosts. I remembered how she'd started comparing me to other men. Casually, offhandedly. "Mark is so confident. Jason really knows how to talk to people." Always framed as observations, never accusations. I told myself it was harmless. Normal. But standing there after that joke, after that look she shared with the neighbor, all those moments snapped into alignment. Like I'd been staring at scattered puzzle pieces for years and suddenly saw the picture they formed. The scariest part wasn't realizing things had changed. It was realizing how long I'd helped them change by refusing to look too closely, by choosing comfort over clarity, by trusting silence more than my own instincts. And once you see it, really see it, you don't get to unsee it. Once I started replaying things, her comments came back with a clarity I didn't ask for. Stuff she'd said months ago, even years, that had landed wrong at the time, but never hard enough for me to push back. She used to joke about being too young to feel this bored, about how marriage wasn't supposed to feel like settling. She'd say it with a laugh, always followed by "I'm kidding," like that erased the meaning. If I looked hurt, she'd smirk and tell me I was too sensitive. There was the night she said, out of nowhere, "I get why people cheat sometimes." When I asked what that was supposed to mean, she rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, I didn't say I would. Relax." Or the way she talked about loyalty like it was conditional. "People aren't property," she'd say. "You don't own me just because we're married." Which was true. I never thought I did. But it always felt like she was arguing against an accusation I hadn't made. She loved reminding me she had options, that if she wanted attention, she could get it, that I was lucky she chose me. She framed it as confidence, independence. I told myself I should admire that. Looking back now, those comments weren't random. They were rehearsals. Little truth leaks disguised as philosophy. Each one testing how much I'd tolerate, how far she could go without consequences. At the time, I swallowed my discomfort because I didn't want to be the jealous husband, the insecure guy. I wanted to be the cool one, the understanding one. Standing there after that joke, though, all I could think was this: she hadn't changed. She'd been telling me who she was the whole time. I just kept choosing not to listen. It wasn't flirting. That's what I kept telling myself. She wasn't touching anyone. She wasn't crossing anything obvious. It was subtler than that, the tone shift, the energy, the way her voice softened when she talked about certain men, like she was stepping into a different version of herself. She talked about them with admiration she no longer reserved for me. Their confidence, their ambition, their presence, always framed as observations, never comparisons, except they were, whether she admitted it or not. When I accomplished something, she nodded. When another man did, she lit up. I remember how she described the neighbor once, weeks before the party. "He's interesting," she'd said. "Kind of intense, but in a good way." I asked what that meant. She shrugged. "You know, not boring." That word again. She insisted it was harmless, that she was just being honest, that I should appreciate her openness. And every time I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, she'd disarm it with the same move. A laugh, a sigh, an eye roll. "God, you're not one of those guys, are you?" So I trained myself not to react, not to notice, not to ask why she remembered every detail about their lives, but forgot things I told her the same day. Not to wonder why she dressed differently for group things when certain men were around. After the joke, after the silence, after her dismissal, I finally understood why it all bothered me. It wasn't attraction I was afraid of. Attraction happens. It was the permission she gave it, the way she entertained it, fed it, protected it from scrutiny. She spoke about other men like possibilities. She spoke about me like an obligation. And once that contrast became clear, it was impossible to pretend I was imagining it. I didn't decide to spy. That's the part people always get wrong. I didn't suddenly become paranoid or controlling. I just stopped filling in the blanks for her. Stopped assuming the best by default. And once I did that, the gaps became impossible not to see. I started watching patterns instead of moments. How often she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. How quickly she tilted the screen away if I walked by. How her mood lifted after certain notifications and soured when there were none. It was subtle, but it was consistent. She became oddly protective of her independence all of a sudden. Simple questions got framed as interrogations. "Why do you need to know? Can I not have my own life?" Meanwhile, she wanted to know where I was at all times, who I was with, when I'd be home, not out of concern, out of control, like she needed reassurance that I was still predictable. I noticed how she dressed differently when going out without me. Not better, more intentional, like she was stepping into a role. And when she came home, there was this faint distance, not guilt, but detachment, as if she'd already spent her emotional energy somewhere else. The strangest part was how calm she seemed. Too calm, like someone who believes they're untouchable, like someone who thinks the story is already written and I'm just slow to catch up. Watching her more closely didn't give me answers right away. What it gave me was something worse, Confirmation that my instincts weren't lying. That whatever was happening, it wasn't happening to her. It was happening by choice. Once I stopped ignoring the patterns, our conversation started sounding off, like badly rehearsed lines that didn't quite match the scene. I'd ask simple questions and get answers that felt technically complete but emotionally empty. How was your night? Fine. Fine used to come with details. Now it was a wall. Sometimes she'd overshare out of nowhere, offering unnecessary explanations I hadn't asked for. We didn't even talk much, she'd say. It was boring. I left early. No names. No context. Just enough information to sound transparent. Too much, actually. Like she was trying to get ahead of something. Other times, her stories changed slightly. Not enough to call out without sounding crazy, but enough to leave a residue. A dinner that was suddenly a drink. A group that became just a couple people. If I circled back later, she'd look at me like I was the one rewriting history. I never said that. You must be confused. That word again. You. I noticed how defensive she got over nothing. How quickly irritation replaced affection. How any attempt at clarity turned into an argument about my tone, my timing, my insecurity. The subject always shifted, away from her actions and onto my reaction. The most unsettling part was how practiced she seemed. Like these conversations weren't new to her. Like she'd already had them in her head, maybe with someone else, before having them with me. I'd walk away from these talks feeling disoriented, replaying them, wondering how I'd lost my footing so completely. And then it hit me. Conversations aren't supposed to make you doubt your own memory. That confusion wasn't accidental. It was a byproduct. And once I recognized it, the ground beneath the marriage started to feel less shaky and more intentionally hollowed out. The realization didn't arrive with proof. No messages. No photos. No smoking gun. It came quietly, almost gently, in the middle of an ordinary moment when she was talking and I realized I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching. Watching how her words flowed without weight. How easily she lied without checking if the lie was necessary. How my presence had become optional in her emotional world. And suddenly it clicked. I wasn't waiting to catch her. I was waiting to accept what I already knew. It wasn't about whether she had slept with someone else yet. That question stopped mattering. What mattered was that she had already crossed the line that actually holds a marriage together, loyalty of intent. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her background. I saw it in how she made plans without considering me. In how my discomfort registered as noise. In how she spoke about freedom like something she needed from me, not with me. She wasn't confused. She wasn't conflicted. She was already gone, just still physically present. And that's when the fear shifted. It wasn't fear of losing her. It was fear of losing myself if I kept pretending. Fear of becoming the guy who negotiates for basic respect, who accepts crumbs and calls it commitment. The moment I stopped asking what is she doing, and started asking why am I still here, everything got brutally clear. Realization doesn't always come like a punch. Sometimes it comes like the absence of pain, the calm certainty that something is already over, whether you admit it or not. I didn't plan it. There was no dramatic build-up, no perfect timing. It came out because I couldn't carry it anymore. We were standing in the kitchen, nothing happening, and I said her name the way you do when you already know the answer. I told her I felt like something was going on. Not accused, stated. Calm. Measured. I said I felt pushed out, talked over, dismissed. I mentioned the joke, the neighbor, the changes, the way she spoke to me now versus before. She didn't look shocked. That was the first thing that hurt. Instead, she crossed her arms and sighed, like I'd just confirmed something inconvenient. I can't believe we're doing this, she said. You're really spiraling. I asked her directly if there was someone else. She laughed, sharp, humorless. Wow, so this is where your head is? Then, immediately after, even if there was, it wouldn't be your business. That sentence landed harder than any confession could have. I asked what that meant. She shrugged. I don't owe you access to every part of my life. I don't owe you loyalty just because you're uncomfortable. There it was. Out loud. No softness. No denial worth believing. When I told her that's not how marriage works, she tilted her head, almost amused. That's how you think it works. The confrontation didn't end with yelling. It ended with distance. With her walking away emotionally intact, and me standing there realizing this wasn't a misunderstanding to fix. It was a truth she was done hiding. After that, everything became about my reaction. Not her words. Not what she implied. Not what she refused to deny. Just me, My tone, my timing, my state of mind. It was like watching someone build a case against you in real time. She told me I was projecting, that I was stressed, that work had made me paranoid. You're not thinking clearly, she said. You've been off lately. When I brought up specific things she'd said, she denied saying them. When I reminded her of the joke, she rolled her eyes. You're still stuck on that? That's honestly concerning. Concerning. As if my reaction was the red flag. She reframed everything. My hurt became control. My questions became accusations. My need for reassurance became entitlement. Every attempt to ground the conversation in facts dissolved into a debate about my personality flaws. You always do this, she said. You twist things and make yourself the victim. I started second-guessing myself mid-sentence, forgetting what I was trying to say, feeling the urge to apologize just to stop the tension. That's when it hit me how disoriented I'd become, how often I walked away from conversations feeling smaller than when I entered them. She wasn't trying to understand me. She was trying to exhaust me, to make standing up for myself feel pointless, to make silence feel easier than clarity. And the scariest part? She was calm the whole time, confident, like someone who knew the rules favored them. That's when I realized gaslighting isn't about convincing you you're crazy. It's about making you too tired to trust what you know. After that, something in me shut down. Not dramatically, not all at once. It was quieter than that, like a dimmer switch slowly turning the lights off. I stopped trying to explain myself, stopped hoping she'd suddenly hear me if I found the right words. I noticed she didn't reach for me anymore, and when she did, it felt automatic. A hand on my arm with no warmth behind it. A question asked out of habit, not interest. And strangely, I stopped missing it almost immediately. That scared me more than the distance itself. I began pulling inward, not to punish her, not to provoke a reaction, but because engaging hurt more than retreating. Conversations became logistical. Who's picking up groceries? What time we're leaving? Surface-level exchanges that required nothing from either of us. She noticed, of course. She always noticed when she was the one losing something. You're being cold, she said one night. I almost laughed. Cold implied emotion. What I felt was absence. There was a strange relief in it. The constant tension in my chest eased once I stopped hoping. Once I accepted that she wasn't going to suddenly choose us again. I slept better, thought clearer. The fog lifted just enough for me to see the shape of what my life had become. Withdrawal wasn't weakness. It was self-preservation. The part of me that still respected himself stepping back before there was nothing left to protect. And somewhere in that quiet distance, I realized I wasn't losing her anymore. I was already gone. Acceptance didn't feel like peace at first. It felt like standing in the wreckage and realizing no one was coming to help clean it up. That whatever this marriage used to be, it wasn't coming back, not because I failed to save it, but because it no longer wanted to be saved. I stopped arguing with her version of reality, stopped trying to get her to admit anything. I didn't need confessions anymore. The clarity was already there, sharp and unnegotiable. Loyalty without respect is just self-abandonment. I saw my role clearly for the first time. I had been loyal to someone who felt entitled to that loyalty, but refused to return it. I had confused patience with strength, silence with maturity. I thought holding on made me honorable. In reality, it was just making me smaller. The moment she told me she owed me nothing, she was right, just not in the way she thought. She didn't owe me loyalty because she had already withdrawn it, and I didn't owe her my dignity in exchange for staying. Walking away wasn't dramatic. There was no final speech, just a quiet decision to stop betraying myself for someone who no longer chose me. Distance became clarity. Clarity became resolve. If you're reading this and something feels off, believe that feeling. If someone tells you they owe you nothing, believe them. And remember this, loyalty should never be one-sided, and love without respect is just a slower kind of loss.